Hello, and welcome to Biomass Magazine's podcast. I am your host, Anna Simet, editor of Biomass Magazine. And today I am joined by Paul Winters, Director of Public Affairs and Federal Communications at the Clean Fuels Alliance America. Paul, hello, and thanks for joining us today.
Well, thank you for having us on today, Anna.
Yeah, always a pleasure. And so we're here today to talk about the Inflation Reduction Act. This expansive package was passed on August 16th, and it includes things from healthcare to carbon emissions to domestic energy production, including biofuels and bioenergy. And in our last two podcasts, we chatted with Tim Ports of the Pellet Fuels Institute about the impacts on modern wood heating, and then Carrie Annand of the Biomass Power Association to talk about impacts on biomass power, of course. But before we get into what is in it for biodiesel, renewable diesel, and SAF, Paul, for our listeners who aren't familiar with your organization, could you talk a little bit about it, its members, and its mission?
Well, thank you. Yes, so Clean Fuels Alliance America rebranded this year. For the past 30 years, we've been the National Biodiesel Board, but our membership includes biodiesel, renewable diesel, and some sustainable aviation fuel producers now. So we had to broaden our name in order to represent our members. So we have more than 100 members across the country. It includes fuel producers. It includes a good deal of feedstock producers, both soybean associations as well as members who render and recycle used cooking oil or animal fats. Essentially, we represent the clean fuels industry from feedstock to marketing and customer service. That includes a number of heating oil dealers up in the Northeast, where we have a growing market, and one we hope is going to particularly see some benefits from the new policies in the Inflation Reduction Act.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. So now that you mentioned it, there is a lot of stuff in it that's relevant to biofuels and bioenergy, as I mentioned before. So maybe if you want to kind of lay out or explain to our listeners the components in it that impact biodiesel, renewable diesel, and sustainable aviation fuel. I understand it extends existing incentives, creates some new ones, and more.
Yeah, that's a key policy for our industry, is extension of the existing biodiesel and renewable diesel tax incentive. It was last extended at the end of 2019. It gave us 3 years of certainty and forward-looking policy. So producers were able to count on that tax incentive from the start of each year. And that really helped our industry during the pandemic. While most other fuel producers in the country fell short or were heavily impacted by demand drops during or demand imbalances actually during the pandemic, our producers were able to increase production by at least 200 million gallons a year, and that was in large part due to the tax incentive. And it, essentially, while gasoline and jet fuel demand dropped pretty drastically, biodiesel demand remained pretty steady. While everyone stayed home from work and cut their travel plans, they all still ordered goods on Amazon and needed consumer items to move across the country. So essentially, the Inflation Reduction Act provides 2 additional years of certainty in that tax policy. It is extended through 2024 without changes to the policy, and that's going to be important as our industry grows and and has planned for growth in the next few years. The other aspect of it is a new tax incentive for sustainable aviation, and this is another blender tax credit. It will be in effect from 2023 to 2024.
Mm-hmm.
It will require producers to register with the Treasury Department, and it will require them to demonstrate that their fuels can achieve a 52% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions compared to petroleum jet fuel.
Mm-hmm.
And then for every percentage point they can achieve above that 50% reduction, the tax incentive will be increased by a penny. So the baseline is $1.25, and then it can go up to $1.75 if those fuels can get to carbon neutrality.
Okay.
So that's those are both blender incentives.
Mm-hmm.
For 2025 through 2027, Congress has designed a new producer incentive. So the tax credit itself shifts to benefit producers directly. That we are still trying to work with our members, waiting for guidances and rules to come from Treasury and the Department of Energy as to how those incentives will be scored and valued.
Uh-huh.
But the credit would have a top value of $1 per gallon for biodiesel and renewable diesel producers. It would maintain the top value of $1.75 for sustainable aviation fuel producers. And it would require everyone to demonstrate their carbon reductions compared to petroleum. Those how those carbon reductions are scored will be up to the Department of Energy, and there is a lot of leeway for that agency to calculate those scores.
Right.
So we're waiting with our members to figure out how that is actually going to get implemented, and that will be a focus of our efforts over the next 2 years to get some clarification and guidance on how that's going to work.
Right. Okay. All right. So outside of what's in this Inflation Reduction Act, are there any other policy pieces or legislative pieces that are priorities for Clean Fuels Alliance that you guys are working on?
Well, there was another program implemented in the Inflation Reduction Act.
Okay.
And that is the Biofuel Infrastructure and Agricultural Market Expansion Program.
That's right.
This is a grant program to help biodiesel and ethanol interests and producers and retailers to roll out infrastructure that will get higher blends of both ethanol and biodiesel to directly to consumers. This would build on the USDA's current Higher Blends Infrastructure Incentive Program, and it would help ensure that consumers have more access to these higher blends. That the funding for that program would run from 2023 to 2031, and it is $500 million appropriated over several years, but available through 2031. This program, the Higher Blends Infrastructure Incentive Program, has been just wildly successful for our industry, for biodiesel producers and biodiesel marketers. The first $100 million of that program enabled our industry to roll out infrastructure and support for more than 1 billion gallons of biodiesel.
Wow.
So with just 25% of the funding going to our industry, our investments supported more than 80% of the gallons that actually were provided to consumers through that program. And USDA today just announced another funding opportunity for another $100 million for that higher blends infrastructure program.
Okay.
So the applications for that are opening today. They're open through November 21st, and it appears that another 25% of that funding will be reserved for terminals and other large-scale projects.
Oh, interesting. So timing is pretty good for this. You said applications open today?
Applications open today, and that's for the Higher Blends Infrastructure Incentive Program.
Right.
And then the new program will take over in 2023.
I got it. Okay. Anything else, Paul?
We're just really looking forward to that program.
Yeah.
It has just been so successful for our industry. The return on the investments that our industry is making is also substantial. With just $25 million in the first round, the USDA has calculated the greenhouse gas emission reductions from our projects at a total of 9.4 million metric tons each year. So the total cost per metric ton is just $2.67, and that's only in the first year. The benefits continue
right
over time. So we are really looking forward to that program. We're very grateful to Congress for getting this program done. It was a bipartisan proposal from both Democrats and Republicans. So we are trying to thank both sides of the aisle that policy was implemented.
Right. Very exciting stuff. So, Paul, have we covered everything that you think, in the Inflation Reduction Act, or anything else that you want to mention before we wrap it up?
Well, we are trying to look at other aspects of the Inflation Reduction Act that could benefit farmers directly and help them to roll out carbon reductions on the farm that would then benefit their markets, including the biofuel market, help lower the carbon scores associated with biofuel production. And then outside of that Inflation Reduction Act, we're also waiting for EPA to propose the 2023 RFS rule and give a signal of how that program will operate under the set rules where EPA does not have any reference to congressionally established volumes.
Okay. Well, I sure look forward to talking with you in the future for some updates, Paul. And I want to thank you so much for joining the Biomass Magazine podcast today and sharing your insight with us.
Well, thank you, and I appreciate being invited.
Absolutely. And for our listeners, be sure to watch for our next podcast in this series on the Inflation Reduction Act. Up next, we'll have Patrick Surface of the American Biogas Council to talk about RNG and biogas. And so with that, I want to thank you for tuning in and have a great day.